Where's the best place for a presenter to sit, Aaron?
You can sit either here, either place, the mic will pick him up, and I've got your letter on here, so.
Okay.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
So I'm here, Sergeant Marcia Shumway is here also with the San Juan County Sheriff's Office. In case you have any questions, if you read the letter that I sent with the packet, it talks about a program that she's trained to teach that is helpful in the case of, it's called RAD, Rape, Aggression, Defense. And so she's here on behalf of the sheriff to show support for why I'm here, but also on behalf of to answer any questions you might have with regards to RAD, if that's where the discussion goes. So I submitted a letter as well as some other documentation, a memorandum from my office, and then a document about RAD, about the program. And I'm just here to talk to you and to answer any questions that you have. I want to make it clear at the outset that we're not here. There's been a lot of organizations that are interested in this issue in San Juan County, and we're not here to put blame on anybody. Certainly not the school district. We're mostly here to educate in hopes of educating and preventing future sexual offense crimes that we seem to be seeing an uptick, a disturbing uptick in, especially with regards to the victims and perpetrators that are or were at the time students in San Juan School District. And I recognize that this is a community problem. It's not a school problem per se, but it's also.
Can I interrupt?
Yeah,
just a minute?
absolutely. Be happy.
I'm going to suggest, and you can tell me if I can do this or not based on laws, that when we have a presenter that clearly doesn't have anybody 6 feet, closer than 6 feet, that they remove their mask, we can understand you better. It'll
Perfect.
hopefully make you more comfortable.
I'm okay with
without
it
having is that
the president's okay with it. Okay.
I would,
Okay.
and if somebody presents and talks and wants to keep their mask on, fine, but I would
You're fine.
invite you to.
Perfect. Okay. I think I can speak better without
Great.
it. So we our goal is to just kind of put the information out there, and then I don't like to just bring up problems. I like to try to help find solutions. And so in the letter you noticed that we had come up with 3 ideas that we thought were worthy, that would be helpful, of areas of where maybe the school district could help out in this regard. So my purpose is to kind of explain why we see a problem and why we think that the school district could help in this regard. I've also had an opportunity to speak with the superintendent several times, and he's graciously offered to allow me and some others to listen to your new program that you have, that unfortunately we don't have a lot of data on because COVID kind of scuttled the school year, to see where it fits in with some of the trends that we're seeing with school-aged victims and perpetrators, to see if there's a way to maybe modify that, or maybe it's perfect and we don't need to do anything. And so I've appreciated Superintendent Nielsen's willingness to talk to me and help out with that. So what you have the numbers, but I think the important thing about the numbers, I'm not going to dwell on the actual numbers here because you have them in front of you. And so the numbers show that there's a problem, but I think context shows where the roots of those problems come from, and how they may apply to the community, to different organizations, mine, the Sheriff's Department, the school district, the Seek Haven shelter, some other organizations that are around as well. And so there's 2 things that I want to bring up that kind of shed some light on where we think there could be some help in the prevention and education. Number 1 is ignorance as to what constitutes sexual assault. There seems to be a disconnect with, so the other thing that Sergeant Shumway does is she's also the interviewer for the Children's Justice Center. She interviews a lot of the victims of our cases that would be students in the school district. And so there's a lack of understanding or acknowledgement as to, on the part of all involved, as to what constitutes consent and what doesn't constitute consent. And we're not talking about that in the sense of sex education teaching abstinence versus consent or whatever else. It's more along the lines of trying to help prevent criminal activity, because that's really what my concern is. It's not the sex education side. It's the trying to help people not be victims of crime and not be perpetrators of crime as well. And so one of the things that we have heard way too often is that a delayed report of a crime of a sexual assault because the victim didn't fight physically back, and so therefore her original understanding was that didn't constitute a sexual assault. I guess I'm here to say that that's just not accurate. There's other ways of saying no and behaving and articulating that you're not okay with this. The other I think part that kind of touches on the context of what we're dealing with is there seems to be a normalization of sexual assault, and what I mean by that is it's with the kids, with the student age, the school age students, as well as in the community. Unfortunately, as you saw in our report, there's been instances of reporting to a family member that this happened, or reporting to a friend, and that person didn't even take it to law enforcement or to a teacher or to anybody else to help report it. There's one thing that we have heard that is highly disturbing as far as the normalization of these crimes is when we have, I guess unfortunately it's expected that you would have a student, a high school age student especially, say that it's not uncommon maybe once a week or once a month to have someone solicit a nude picture of them over a social media outlet or over text message. But what we're seeing is that we've actually had some of our victims who have said that it's actually multiple times a day that they are being solicited for that sort of thing. And they don't see it as a problem, it's more of an annoyance, when in reality that's a felony. Even to ask for it, it's a really big deal. But they don't understand, there's no understanding of that, and so that's a problem that we're seeing, as well as the not reporting. Part of the not reporting, I think, unfortunately comes from this idea of nobody will believe me, nothing will happen if I report it, I'll be gaslighted or belittled in the community or in school or on my team or whatever it is, right? In whatever group I hang out in, and so I think it's important that law enforcement, my office, and then also the school district and anybody else who deals with students make it clear that we are listening, and I will say that law enforcement is committed to, and the statistics are showing that we're committed to following through with any allegation that we hear. If that turns into charges, then that's what it does, and if it doesn't, then we follow the evidence. And statistically, it's actually a very small number of cases that are false reports of such crimes. It's just not statistically as big of an issue as maybe it's sometimes perceived in the community. The last thing that I wanted to really say, and then I'll answer any questions that you might have. I guess there's two things. The numbers that you have in front of us only reflect the jurisdiction that the San Juan County Sheriff's Office, Blanding PD, and the San Juan County Attorney's Office has. Now, that being said, there are victims in those cases from, I believe, 4 of your high schools that we have had jurisdiction over, and so we've done that. However, it because of jurisdictional issues from a prosecution perspective, that doesn't include any cases that the FBI or Navajo PD might be investigating. We have jurisdictional limitations, and so this is not everything that is going on in San Juan County. This is just what has come across my office's desk and law enforcement's. The final thing is we understand that the juvenile justice reform that occurred in 2017 took a lot of teeth from the school district, as well as from the juvenile courts to help students. And it's unfortunate because in the juvenile system we have an opportunity to help prevent some of this behavior. And they could go in front of a judge, they could see me, they could see law enforcement in a serious situation, but in a way that we can maybe curb some behavior. And that's not the case now. So when they're finally seeing me or Marcia or somebody from the legal community, they're looking at 15 years to life. They're looking at felonies that will follow them for the rest of their life. They're looking at things like that. And so this isn't just a victim-centered discussion. It's also trying to look out for and educate potential perpetrators as well so that we can maybe curb some of that behavior. That being said, I would entertain any questions that you might have on any of the three ideas that we brainstormed and brought to you, or any other questions that you might have about any of the information that I've presented to you or submitted to you in writing.
Steve? Lisa? So my question is what have you two, in collaborating, decided is the best thing to reach those students in the schools?
So I'll let Superintendent Nielsen speak for himself. My understanding is we have discussed it in the very near future. This meeting came on us, and so as it does occasionally, and so we have discussed going over the program through Safe Schools that the school district has in place to analyze it, and have Marcia, who hears the stories and as she's interviewing these people and going through the investigations to see if it's reflective of what we're seeing here or not. So that's one thing, and then the other thing was, Superintendent Nielsen and I did discuss the three ideas that I presented in the letter, but it is very preliminary just because of the timing of this meeting.
Sure.
Can I speak to that?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I would say that yes, the data in these charts was very alarming to me. It was definitely eye-opening to see the numbers put to a chart and a visual. And I committed to Mr. Laws and to anyone else that has inquired or we've met with that we do have a role in this concern. Without a question, the school district, we have the opportunity to provide education. We have the opportunity and a huge need for a successful reporting system where there's safety, there's confidentiality, there's aspects of our system where students will come forward and they find that there's advocates for them in a proper manner. And so what we talked about, I think all of the ideas in here we want to further explore because they do look very doable. And we want to, as Mr. Laws talked about, we want to look at what we have in place. Some of the things we have in place we just started even implementing last year. We had some really good ideas. We had a plan to take our Hope Week and make it centered around training and education, and then COVID-19 came and our Hope Week was gone. And so we were virtual for the whole fourth quarter. So with those plans are still in place, and we'll continue to work on those. So I just think we have committed that we will be a collaborator at the table. We'll look at what we have in place, we'll reflect about it if it needs improvements. One of the things we've talked a lot about is having a consistent message. What's their interpretation, of consent? Are we using the same terminology in the school as they're going to hear in the court system, so that we're not confusing our youth, that we're very unified and consistent in our vocabulary? So we'll look at for all of those type of angles at what we're doing. And I'd love to come back to the board in a few board meetings with a follow-up of this. And I would also welcome the board, if we continue with the videos in Safe School as part of our program, I really would like the board to make sure you're very familiar with them and you know exactly what's being shown in the schools to our students. And that would involve a lot of work with parents and all in a lot of different areas, but we'll take those steps to move forward.
So could we invite you back probably November?
Yeah, absolutely.
November meeting, let's plan on that. Would that give us enough time?
That would
I-
be the meeting.
I would
Oh,
think.
let's
Is
see.
that again, I mean, that would be ideal, maybe,
September.
or I guess.
Yes, November.
We're gonna talk
no.
about the location of that, but it is potentially go up, I think.
Could be, if
No,
not,
that's
we'll
fine.
move it to
That's fine,
December
too.
for
Okay.
sure.
Yeah, the one thing I just,
December would be
Lots
better.
of-
the one thing I just wanted to add really quick, because I know you're on a time schedule, is the schools offer, from what we're seeing, we've seen a lot of unfortunate situations where parents are saying that they don't have time to deal with this on behalf of their victim child. But on the flip side, we've had instances where it was reported to a student or to a teacher, and it was handled appropriately, and we were able to move forward, and the student felt comfortable talking to a teacher, and so that's why there are instances. Now those aren't mutually exclusive. The reason that student went to the teacher wasn't because they weren't comfortable at home. It just there's good examples of students feeling very comfortable talking to their teachers, and so it's an opportunity that maybe doesn't present itself at their home, and that's why I feel like the school district is in a really good position to help us with the education and prevention. So I appreciate it. I
Perfect.
appreciate it.
So plan on you coming back, and then if you could add to your piece, community-wise, parent education, what we're gonna do with that piece of it also, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah,
Come back.
so that's a part of it, and we're working with, just so you're aware, we're working with Seat Haven,
Okay.
the shelter, as well as law enforcement, as well as, you all have an opportunity to educate parents as well, and so we'll certainly loop you in and the superintendent into that conversation
Okay.
as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank
We
you so
appreciate
much.
you coming.
Thank you.
I have a question, hold on.
Yes, oh wait, Nelson, sorry,
That's so quick.
I'm just seeing an empty chair, go ahead. Go ahead, Nelson.
Yes, Mr. Law, now, I'm seeing that Native American students, females, are a high percentage here at the bottom of your page for the fifth. So, with that said, are you also working with Navajo Nation, with the Kayenta district and the Shiprock district,
Did you hear that?
So
or our Navajo students?
So those numbers reflect students that those crimes either were committed off reservation. Well, they were committed off reservation, either meaning that the student goes to a different school, or they were, or the crime occurred off of the reservation. It's certainly, I think, an advantage to talk to them. We're still, a lot of these numbers, this huge increase in numbers is still fairly recent. They've always been there, but this jump is fairly recent, and so we have not done that, but that is a really good idea, because we don't know what they're dealing with down there simply because of the jurisdictional issues from a prosecution perspective. So I think that's a really good idea, and we work closely with the FBI, and they deal with some cases, but I think pulling in the Kayenta district and the Shiprock district, because I believe that's where Whitehorse High School would fall. I think that would be a very good idea long term as well. I like that idea.
Yeah, also with maybe with crunching the numbers of the Native American students, rather than let's call the district, and get a reality of real numbers for Whitehorse and Mountain Valley schools. Maybe that will open or get the attention of Navajo Nation Police Department. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that, and some of the numbers we have are students at those schools, but it's very limited because it's only if it occurred off of the reservation. So I like that idea, and I will follow up on that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else, Nelson?
No, that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Number 2, Byron, ACS, you're up. Okay, you can both take it, and if you'd like to take your masks off, then you're welcome to do so.
That would be nice. So, this is just a preliminary introduction of an idea of an ACS, an alternative care site. So, earlier this year when the pandemic predictions were quite high, and they didn't become massive as perhaps predicted. There was several alternative care sites created across the country and in different countries. Very few of them were actually used, partly because the definition of a care site means that you would be providing some medium type of medical care in a facility as an alternative or overflow to a hospital or ICU system. Keep that in mind, that's the overarching concept. There's hotels that we've been quarantining people in. That's the lowest level, very convenient for the patient. And then on the medical side, ICUs haven't reached max. The University of Utah is maintaining level
I'm
about
sorry, Byron, you need to speak up a little bit more or get closer to the mic.
Maybe bring your chair in a little closer, yeah, sorry.
Who's your teacher, Liz? Who's your teacher, Liz?
So today we have a weekly call with the University of Utah and all the regional hospitals. The CMOs and all the CEOs give an update on where they're at with COVID, and it varies quite a bit region to region. I think Kirk's on those calls too. The University of Utah lately has been leveled off at about 90% of their ICU capacity, so that could be easily maxed out. If this virus acts similar to most seasonal viruses, which all indications are that it should, we ought to expect an increase this winter, sometime maybe around December to February. A lot of variation in when that could happen, but all our medical providers think that will happen for sure this winter as things cool down in the temperature. So with that introduction, I also sent you a report of our testing and things like that, and you can study that or share that. It's not confidential. Yeah, that's the report there that you're seeing. So we've tested almost 1/3 of our entire patient population, which every year is about 18,000 unique individuals. So we've been testing fairly aggressively. You've seen the number on the active cases on the last page decline. So we're in a good spot and improving, as is the Navajo Nation. Some urban areas, particularly around Phoenix, they saw a very large spike. Up north, they've seen quite a spike. And each one of those cases eventually can lead to an individual's potential death. So we saw an outbreak at the nursing home. That result, as far as I know, is about 23% death rate for anybody who caught it for the patients, which is shockingly high. So we want to avoid scenarios where large populations of older people are exposed. So we've been doing the hotel quarantines for patients who are positive and need to move out of their homes, but this ACS could be a plan B, last resort option if the healthcare system become overloaded. So Kirk is engaged in some of the high schools, the Army Corps of Engineers, to do a site assessment. We worked with them and we completed one on the Whitehorse High School also. And so today we wanted to just bring up the idea of a collaborative arrangement where UNHS partners to provide probably the expertise and the staffing, and then the school district in theory would provide the facility permission to modify it, and maybe the health department would chime in as a third party with the Utah Department of Health to help facilitate an ACS. And that's what we are presenting today. And maybe I'll turn it to Kirk if he wants to add to that.
I don't know if I have too much to add. We earlier in the pandemic, as it started to ramp up, we did have the Army Corps of Engineers down, and we looked at several different facilities in town. San Juan High School being one of those. We looked at, I think, 5 or 6 different facilities at that time to see if we had a good feel for what would serve well as an alternate care site if our hospitals were overwhelmed. Thankfully, it hasn't looked yet like we need that, but we do have 2 concerns going into winter. One, as Byron mentioned, would be that some viruses, respiratory viruses in particular, once people start having to stay indoors, have a tendency to spread more rapidly and sometimes cause more acute symptoms. And the second piece is that we'll be hitting flu season at the same time, which already strains our healthcare system. If flu season hits hard in a particular year, oftentimes we'll see ICU beds taken up with influenza patients. And so there's the the real potential this winter that we'll hit a combination of an uptick of COVID cases combined with an uptick of influenza, which could be a strain. If that were to happen and our reference hospitals were to be full, and our local hospitals were to fill up, we're just trying to have a plan in our pocket on, that we can pull out and say, how can we attend to people that might need a temporary alternate care site, so that our hospitals can focus on critically acute cases of disease, and people with milder disease that need nursing care or less observation would have a site. We felt, based on the Army Corps of Engineers assessment, that in the Blanding and Monticello areas, of the buildings that we had them look at, San Juan High School was probably our best option as an alternate care site for that area. And I think you guys felt that Whitehorse High School was probably a good site on the south end of the county. But I think what we really wanted to do is, early on in this, we have separate sort of funding streams, and we kind of answered a separate group, so we kind of did this independently of each other. And now that we've had time to take a breath, we said, let's look at this in a coordinated way, and we would collaborate on a single site to serve the county, and have some alternate sites as necessary identified. So I think, is that a good summary?
I think that's good. Yeah, it's
Reasonably.
just to keep, not the ball rolling even, but just the idea out there that if you read through the details of the Army Corps report, there's a lot of criteria that have to be met in order to have a sufficient care site happen. Space, of course, enough restrooms and bathrooms, a food service, fire suppression, HVAC. We checked out another one of our old clinic, and it was missing quite a few of those on the checkbox list. The gymnasiums, across the country are usually the preferred site for something like this. So there's not a firm proposal today, but it's just to make you aware that if in the next few months things escalate, we would probably come back and discuss in more detail what needs to happen, what could happen as far as a collaborative arrangement goes. Again, it's a last resort type of situation. The University of Utah and other hospitals have proven to be pretty flexible on converting regular beds to ICU type beds, but even that has a limit, and some states have almost approached that. And if you look at the weekly death rate for other seasonal viruses, there's a huge trough in the trend for the summer months because people are outdoors and things like that. So there's always a peak from either January or late December to February, and that's quite a dramatic peak statistically speaking. So we're looking at that closely, and just we don't want to be caught unprepared. So it would involve the school district if we were to, or the health department.
So have you had this discussion prior?
Not tremendously. Back when they came to San Juan High, we were involved. We went through the building with them, and I think there's been discussion in the Montezuma Creek area, but not to very much depth. I have some questions. I would like, do you designate a alternative care center? Do you, is that just a designation that you have the authority to do? Or does it have to be a cooperation between us and you? I mean, I'm just looking for how this might go down if things got really, if we did have a jump in cases, would you come and say, hey, we need to, so to speak, take Whitehorse High School? And
I don't know. This is my first pandemic, so I say that all the time. But
hopefully our
really,
last.
it's my first pandemic, and everything is new to me. It is something that falls under the public health emergency protocols. I don't think that it would ever be a situation where we were all taken by surprise that there was a need for patients to spill out of our hospitals. I think that we would have weeks' notice as things
See that approach.
progressed in our region and at our referral hospitals as we started to recognize that we were reaching a crisis mode, and we would probably have some declaration of a local emergency. And I don't think it would be anything where it would be overnight, but yeah.
Tribally, the Navajo Nation's ordered and closed 2 ACSs, so I would think there'd gotta be some tribal say in when and where. So, you know, UNHS have to be aware of those.
So schools, this, you know, in the December, January months, if that's when we see that rise in cases, you know, school would still be in session now. It very possibly could be virtual, but teachers
Right.
still utilize usually their resources, and we still utilize the kitchen to get meals out and things like that. So, you know, those would be our concerns.
Exactly, yeah.
And we'd have to coordinate all those things, but.
Well, just a comment, for instance, in Blanding, that, and maybe it's not big enough, but a place like the Arts and Event Center at Utah State would seem like a natural choice to me, because it's not used on a daily basis for specific things, that it's more of a, I know they have a few offices in there, but has something like that been looked at that would not take so much from what is already going on in a school from day to day? Have you looked at other buildings
Yeah,
like
we've looked
that?
at quite a few. Just within Blanding, I know that the Army Corps of Engineers evaluated the rec center, the LDS Chapel on Main Street, their former facility, your former
The old
clinic, the old clinic.
But what about?
And I don't
State?
recall if, I don't think that site was specifically looked at for whatever
It
reason.
seems like it's got a kitchen, it's got, I would think it should be something that would be looked at, because it's not regularly used, and it wouldn't interrupt nearly as much as San Juan High School if we were still holding school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and ideas like that, today was just to present like what we look at on the healthcare side, what solutions governments and different people have come up with, and that ACS report is just to get your minds rolling about, you know, worst case scenarios. And like Kirk said, there'd be several weeks where it was ramping up. University of Utah would say, we're done, we can't take any more. And then the regional ones like Grand Junction would say the same thing. And then our little hospital would say the same thing in Monticello and Blanding. And we're all full, we can't take any more, you know, our hallways are full. So this is a really disaster type of preparation.
And we probably wouldn't be holding school.
And we would, and
Yeah,
that.
I think
However-
very unlikely that we'd be
Yeah.
holding, at least in-person school, we may be
Right, but like I
moving
said, our
fully
teachers
virtual.
will attend, they will be in their classrooms,
Yeah, it's,
and there will still be activity, but anyway, that's just a thought,
Yeah.
that really, to also be considered, that
Yeah.
if that was a good fit,
yeah, I'm sure it
it
would
could,
be.
you know.
Any other comments? Steve, Lisa? Nelson, you have any comments?
I have one thought.
Yes, go ahead.
If we're wrapping up.
Yep, we're wrapping.
I just want to, I know there's other agencies that could be included in this statement, but we have the health department here, and we have UNHS represented here. And I just want to thank you for your cooperation in working through this first pandemic that we're all going through. I want the board to be aware that we have reached out multiple times to both of these agencies, among other agencies, and found great support and great collaboration. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Back at you.
Thank you for coming, and I assume you'll just keep in touch with us.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
We'll get in touch.
Thank you so much. Okay, we are to our reentry plan update.
Awesome.
Julie, Christie, are you coming up here?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, just
please
go ahead.
do.
You know, we met, I think it was 3 weeks ago, and I felt really good about where we left that meeting. We had a lot of work to do, and there was a lot on the table, but I felt like we had a good start, and the team that had worked so diligently throughout the entire district, I think had done a marvelous job of getting us with a plan and a direction. We left that meeting knowing that there's still some very important steps that had to be taken, and we're back to report on those steps and to report of where we're at. Since that meeting, I will let you know that we've had an opportunity to collaborate with multiple agencies and individuals. And so the very last document on your agenda and your included documents has recommendations in the end of it. That's the document I'm gonna look at the most, and it's certainly first. But at the top of that, it talks about, we've taken information from President Nez, from Governor Herbert, the things that they have communicated. We've talked to the San Juan County Public Health. We've talked to chapter house leadership, both individually and together. We've talked to the Utah Navajo Commission, the Ute Mountain Ute Education Department, San Juan School District Administration. We've had our principals together. They've had a voice for the teachers that they are communicating with and talking back with. And we've reached out and had a dialogue with SJEA, our Teachers Association. So we feel like we've tried to be collaborative. We've tried to, again, make this process as unified as possible so that we can move forward together in a common vision. Also, I want the board to be aware, at the state level, there's been tremendous work done, and that has all filtered down to the district level. There have been numerous waivers that have been passed by the state board that will give us some flexibility in many of the things that we've been held to in the past, such as even as recently and just recent, even the 180 days has now had even a little more flexibility given to it, where even a week ago that hadn't been done. But the 990 minutes, the 180 school days, there's now room for flexibility in both of those, where just a week ago there was only in one. And in so many of our reporting and our testing areas, there's been waivers done as well. So at the state level, there's been tremendous work to see what needs to happen at the district level to navigate this situation and to move forward in a successful manner. So be aware of that as well. So after all of that, I am prepared today to make some recommendations to the board. And I fully throw this out for your discussion and your perspective of looking at this, and I will try to share rationale in for any needs that you might have. But so I'll just read down through these recommendations. The first recommendation would be to designate time for required COVID-19 and Canvas training. We are required to provide COVID-19 training to all staff, and that's required. So we want to find designated time to do that. We also know that our teachers need more Canvas training. So to find time for that, we are advocating to change the first day for students to report to school, changing it from Thursday, August 20th to Monday, August 24th. That would be from the Thursday to the following Monday. So not an absolute major change as far as the calendar is concerned, but those 2 extra days could play very valuable in the training that we're required. And some of that would be used for teacher preparation as well, because we are still very concerned about the time we can give our teachers to be ready for the virtual and the in-person, especially when they have both of those formats playing out. There's quite a bit to think about and to stay ahead of in both of those. So recommendation number 2 would be revise the daily schedule to create an approximate, and I really emphasize the word approximate, 90-minute time block for teachers to complete the increased responsibilities related to both in-person and virtual teaching. Now, if you're 100% virtual, which we'll talk about, that day is pretty much your whole day and you're going to utilize it as best. But if you are in a school where we foresee that you will have in-person students and you'll start with some virtual, and it could change, the number of virtual could change overnight. You might have 3 or 4 students that become isolated or quarantined overnight. Or you might have parents that feel like, I heard of a little outbreak or something, I'd like to take the next week. Now, we don't want it a situation where kids just go back and forth kind of at a whim. We're going to work with administration will work with parents to find that best location, the best schedule for their child, but still there is flexibility that they can go back and forth with working with administration and allowing time for proper arrangements to be made and preparations to be made that can happen. But when a teacher is dealing with both of those formats, there are additional concerns, additional responsibilities. And we are concerned with the time they'll have to meet those demands. So this extra time would shorten the time that the students would be in the building, but would create a block for teachers to be able to tend to these increased responsibilities. Now, I also have attached on here, and we can look at that a little later after the recommendations, but I do have attached on here a draft, a starting point for both a late start and an early release schedule. So you could look at it through both visions of maybe would it be better. There's pros and cons of going each way. So recommendation 3 would be in the river region, start the year with instruction delivered 100% virtually. Reevaluate this recommendation after first quarter. Now, we talked about in our last meeting that between that meeting and this meeting, we would work very diligently, and we would have an online registration process in place. And I can't help but pay tribute to the individuals that have put that together, because I'm a little bit in awe what I saw happen in the short amount of time, and how effectively it happened was pretty impressive. So to Aaron and your department and all those that helped with you, that's a real tribute. But what we're learning from that data now is that in our river region, nearly 90 to 95% want option 2, and a very few out of that 90-95 want option 3, but the very vast majority want option 2. So knowing that, and knowing that we were looking at a possibility of having 2 or 3 students per grade in our schools in the river region, it made sense to ask the question to all the stakeholders, the chapter leaders. We received a press release from President Nez, and all of the leaders, all the president, the health department in the area, they all advocated for schools to start virtually. So when we saw the support was unified, I feel that we now, with that much support in that area, it is my recommendation that we just move the whole region to 100% virtual. And we will work individually, if that's the decision the board goes with, we will work individually with those few parents that may have selected, that did select in person, to try to help them understand what drove that change. Because in our last meeting, we did talk about there's choice in here, and that would be removing the choice for a very small group of parents in that region. And then in number 4 would be, we recommend that if you are in 100% virtual instruction delivery or time, and this is important to know that this isn't just, we're recommending that the river region start that way, but the mountain region could at any time very possibly be converted to 100% virtual. If at any time the cases show a real uptick, and when I work very closely with Mr. Benj on this, and we could be receiving instructions that that's the recommendation or the requirement that we move to 100% virtual. And so our recommendation is, if any time you see 100% virtual in a school or a region, that the athletics would be suspended as well. And so that's something to think about. That is we looked at that carefully, and we thought if we're to that point where we are moving all students virtually, we just don't think it makes any sense to bring them all back for a practice or put them on a bus. If we've gotten to that point, there's definitely some pretty extreme criteria that's driving us to be 100% virtual. So that's a recommendation
So is
as
that
well.
decision gonna be made regionally or school?
I think it could be school-based. There's a chance that you could have, if we started with 100% virtual in the river region, of course, that would already be known for those schools. But let's say in the Blanding or Monticello area, one of those 2 communities has an outbreak. And working with the health department, we get either the requirement or the strong recommendation that that school needs to go 100% virtual. What this recommendation is saying is that we aren't just closing down the in-person instruction. We are closing down the in-person instruction and in-person outside activities as well. All sports, all other activities would be suspended until it's switched back to in-person. So it may not be that their season is canceled, depending on how long it played out. But it could be if the requirement was for 14 days it needed to close down, then possibly there's games that are postponed or canceled during that time, but not necessarily the whole season. So, I think we're down to 6 then. We are recommending we require face coverings for student, adult participants, and spectators who attend sports and extracurricular activities in indoor facilities throughout fall sports season. And we'll reevaluate that after fall sports, so that could very easily continue. And hearing the concerns about where this might go in the winter months, there's a really good chance that would continue. But what that is saying again is in our volleyball area, anything indoors, masks would be required for both participants and spectators. And that also, really, I don't know what our choice there is. I mean, I guess we always have a choice, but that is in compliance with what the governor has put in place as well. He expects that from all individuals that enter a public school. So that's staying in compliance with that expectation of the governor's orders. Then 7 would require face coverings for student, adult participants who attend sports and extracurricular activities in outdoor facilities throughout fall sports season. Some logical exceptions may apply. That's referring to Friday night's football game. Would you or would you not see, or would you not want to see the students that are on the sideline of the football game, would they be in mask or not in mask? This is making a recommendation that if you're not in the game, and it does say there's logical exceptions, that would be if you're playing. But if you're not in the game and you're on the sideline, you would put a mask on. So the board just needs to think that through. There's just so many variables that are involved that we need to give clear direction on, and we need to make sure the board is is pleased with what's being communicated, because it very easily could come back to this board as well. You could have a lot of concern over this, so I think it's really important that you think through, you know, the rationale and the reasoning behind this. And we've tried to put a lot of thought into this. You know, our thought a little bit is this: if we can control the upticks in this virus, you know, we have a team right now that is quarantined at San Juan High School. There is a team right now that is on a 14-day quarantine. The amount of positive cases, and Mr. Benj is here, so I appreciate that. You can weigh in at any time with help and support on this. But if they tick up in any one community, we are at risk of the whole school possibly being required to move to virtual instruction. And then all activities, and that could certainly already not be our decision as well. All activities could be quarantined for 14 days. So our thinking is everything we can do to helps us have a little more opportunity and chance of getting through our seasons and getting to the end of our seasons with letting our student athletes and participants in these activities participate and do what they want to do without being shut down. It's, in my mind, there's a real threat to a number of games being lost, postponed, or canceled due to quarantines. If you're reading the paper, Lone Peak's very upset today. There's an article in the paper today with their soccer team, I think it's their soccer team, being quarantined for 14 days. And so anyway, another maybe rationale is if you turn on the TV and you watch any of the professional sports happening right now, you see every single non-participant wearing a mask. If they're on the Boston Red Sox and they're not in the game, they're wearing a mask. Ironically, I was looking at probably 20 to 30% of those that are in the game are wearing a mask. That really got my attention when probably 30% of the Major League Baseball players are wearing a mask that are playing in the field and batting. So that was kind of interesting to me. But anyway, this is coming from discussion with administrators, with a lot of different things. And so that's where this is coming from. Number 7, and then, is that where we're at?
No, we're on 8.
8. Okay, so strongly encourage face coverings for spectators who attend sports and extracurricular activities in outdoor facilities. So if you notice, that's just strongly encourage. If we were to follow through with these recommendations, Friday night, we would have signs up saying, and the high school would put out through their Facebook and their social media means, we strongly encourage masks for all spectators. But the word does not say require. There are districts, I'm very much aware of what Grand is advertising, what Carbon is advertising. They are requiring masks for all participants and spectators. So, again, there's an area where I think the board needs to make sure you're where you want to be on that one, because this is not, there are districts that have gone further than this. We're strongly encouraging. Now, our players on the sideline, if we followed these recommendations, would have masks on, but we would not necessarily have masks, we would not require masks on the spectators in the stands with these recommendations. And that was borderline. There was a part of me want, anyway, I'd love the board's take on that. So number 9, eliminate all concession stand services at all sponsored sports and extracurricular activities throughout fall sports seasons. Again, this is one that's not absolutely required. I will say this, the concession stand area is a big concern. It can be a place where we all line up next to each other and wait in line. You have people that are in a very closed area for a lot longer than 15 minutes is a very important number, because 15 minutes, and if you're under 15 minutes, you have a far less risk of that being exposed to this virus. If you're with someone that has the virus and you're there more than 15 minutes, when they come in and do an investigation, that will be one of the leading criterias, as if you were exposed at a long enough time to really share the air and the droplets that are shared and are left in the air. There's a time frame there that really increases your risk. If you're in a concession stand and you just spend even 30 minutes, an hour and a half, like usually happens with those volunteers that are working in there, you're in a very close place, and you're there for usually quite a length of time. Now, again, this isn't required, but when I looked at everything that we have to worry about come Friday night and in the other activities, I literally said, is there some that we can take off our worry list? And this is one I think we can. I honestly believe that if our spectators feel strongly that they like a candy bar or a soda, they can bring it. They could bring it and very easily have it. Many do. They can bring a pack of M&Ms and have them there, and that would greatly reduce people joining together and a log jam there at the concession stand. So that's the area there, that the recommendations that I come prepared to make as far as that. I have some other items I want to talk to, but I'd like to stop right there and just have a discussion as to any of those recommendations. And I'd like the board to figure out where you feel best falls, and I would love the board to make a motion at the end of this meeting that clearly shows that this is where we'd like things to fall for this district in the next, as we navigate through these activities and the next quarter of school.
Nelson? Is he on? Nelson, do you have any comments with those recommendations? We'll let you lead.
No, I don't have any. I am in favor and supporting the suggestions that the superintendent has read over, and I do have information that I received from the Ojeto chapter with their concerns, which have been met, the virtual teaching 100%. So I'm good with it. I'm in support of it. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Steve?
Number one, on starting school on the 24th, so we would miss 2 days of instruction, but you said there's a little bit of flexibility in the 180 days.
Yes.
How does that play in?
They've actually made it, and just recently they've revised this again, up to 6 days can be moved from instruction to training or preparation for what we're dealing with. So
you're
174 days are required of instruction, so we would be fine. We already have 2, our CCR days. In the past, they've allowed 4. They're allowing 6 with this COVID pandemic. So we've always used 2 of our 4 on our CCR days. But this would mean we'd use 4 of our possible 6. If you go past 6, you have to ask for a waiver and go through a process. But there are 6 that you do not have to ask for a waiver on.
So you're recommending to use those 2 days as part of the 6, and don't have to readjust.
Do not have to
schedules
adjust
for-
our calendar, it won't require any change in our school calendar.
A lot of places that require face masks, like you go into Costco or Walmart or something like that, they have them there so they don't have to turn anybody away. If we're requiring face masks, is there a plan to have a supply of face masks to hand out if they're required?
Kyle, would we have sufficient amount to, or what would that do? That's a good point, and I don't know that we've really analyzed that, because I think we should probably have face masks available in our indoor things when we would require them for our spectators.
I would tell you at this point, we wouldn't have sufficient supply. I mean, we purchase based on our school numbers and our faculty and staff, so to
We have
provide the
to
public.
add to it?
Yeah, provide the public with.
Are they available? Is there any concern with getting them?
No, I think we could get masks. Well, if we wanted to go with the basic mask, yes, like the one you're wearing, we could provide those. We've had good accessibility on those that could provide those.
This is what we would provide, these are pretty simple.
Mhm.
But if it's a, if somebody's required to come, but if it's their choice to come to an extracurricular activity, then I say we have them there for a charge. People can bring their own, and if they choose not to bring them, or they forget their mask, then, but it's not something that they, are required to come and participate in. It's a choice to participate. And so we could have those, cause I can tell you, mine would be out in my car every time. Oh, dang, I forgot.
So are you
Just
suggesting,
'cause
you're
I-
suggesting that maybe there could be like a quarter added on to the cost of getting in the activity if they had to also purchase the
Well,
mask?
yeah, if they're getting into the activity, you wanna buy a mask too, here's,
Or you need to buy a mask? So you're suggesting there'll be a slight cost of the mask added?
yeah,
Slight-
just to cover
which-
the cost of the mask, because
Which either way.
I would be one who would be like, oh, dang, I forgot my mask, not on purpose, honestly, but I'd remember better if it cost me
Many
every
might
time.
walk back out to the parking lot and grab their other one rather than.
Yeah, or I might say the quarter's easier, the 50 cents.
And with this, are we saying that this would also be applicable for outside events, just inside events, correct?
Well, outside's highly encouraged, but not required, but if we
Say
change, if the
both.
board wanted to change that to required, which I'm not recommending, but if you wanted to, then it would fall under that same scenario, but.
We'd probably blow through our masks pretty quick at a football game.
Well, even though it's required or, suggested, if you get there and decide, oh yeah, I want one, you're either gonna walk to your car and get it. 'Cause, I'm probably like everybody else, there's probably 10 masks in my car. It's just too easy to walk away and not take it. So, and just grab one at the door because they're available. But if you have to pay for it, you're gonna, I don't know.
Just to cover the cost of the masks, or it could be a fundraiser too.
Yeah.
Since we're missing out on concession stands.
And that would,
But-
yeah.
And
But-
if it's free, people will be just grabbing
Yeah,
one, two,
yeah.
three, they grab them all.
And that's why I have about 4 in my cars. I went to St. George, and every time I go to somewhere that's I'm just not used to it, and so then I'd get to the door and they'd say, you can't go in, and I'd say, oh, well, and then say, we have one, and I'd be like, oh, okay, that added to my little, I just,
Yeah.
and I'm the first to say, I don't purposely do things like that, but it was more convenient to take theirs right there at the door because it was there than
But if it's
to make
not-
my 8-year-old granddaughter walk back with me. That would have been really painful.
Any objections on that, Steve? Nelson? So, my question is, okay, eliminating the concession stands, I'm not totally opposed to that, but when you're in a close proximity of each other, but if you're requiring masks to do and I can ask this to you, Mr. Bailey, cause the mask is, I'm assuming that's your prevention, is your mask, so why can we not have the concessions if everyone's required to wear them and you're in there with
I
your
wanna be
mask
clear,
on?
we can have our concessions. They're not being absolutely
Right.
required not to have them. This is recommendations, and that one alone, I'll be honest, is probably more my recommendation than any other person or agency. As I look at, when I worked with Mr. Nielsen over Salmon High for Friday night, and we talked about all the things to be concerned about, I just felt like, man, there's so much here. If we could take something off your list, it would be sure helpful. And one of the biggest things that is possible to take off the list is concession stands. But please be aware that we can have a concession stand. We've just gotta do it in a very safe manner, and we've gotta supervise it, and it's another thing.
My biggest,
One second, were you gonna comment back on that?
No, I was gonna say, my recommendation was that, they have strict procedures in place. We haven't forbade anybody from having concessions, but we did ask them to comply with the current yellow recommendations that are in place for food service, where everyone would be masked and there would be, some safeguards in place. And I think that as they evaluated that, it felt very cumbersome, to comply with.
So just wearing the mask is not gonna be the prevention, or is it?
So-
It's probably the primary prevention would be to have all the persons working in the concession area wear masks would be one of the primary concerns.
Okay.
so I'm saying, my primary concern is not people in a line, masked or unmasked. My concern, because I've helped in those concession stands, the people who are in there are not trained or regularly, routinely, do that kind of thing. So, you know, they'll dish up whatever, the little chips and put the cheese on it with their gloves on, go over, handle money with their gloves on, go back, put more chips in. It's just not something, if you work in a food facility place and you do it every day, you're trained and you practice. Even if we train this group that goes in Friday night, they haven't practiced it, and so I've just seen over and over again, the food preparation and handling is probably never done correctly.
Sure.
And then the next week, there's a new group in, and so it's
I
not
think-
something they do.
Just adding to what Mary said there, what I have found, and what she said is so true, there's a mindset of how we do things. And even if you go in and you say, okay, there's a change in how we have to do it, we all know about COVID, and you line out a new system, you'll be surprised how quickly it's not being followed. And it's not because we have bad people. It's because it's our human nature to revert back to how we have always done things, because this is all of our first pandemics. And so if that administrator and administrators, and that's why I'm looking at it through the administrator eyes going, man, there is so much you better be on top of. And if I could take something off the list, because we have found, we've given explicit, and we're reteaching and reteaching even our staff in some things, because they're reverting back to the, well, it doesn't really mean here. Yeah, it does mean here. Oh, it doesn't really, yes, it does mean that. It's just human nature. And so that's where this recommendation's coming from, is just
Okay.
to say that's a lot to stay ahead of.
Sure. Nelson, did you have a comment? What he said.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that, last week, Thursday evening, Navajo Nation did their report, and the new cases at that time were 30 cases. As of Sunday or Monday afternoon, they updated the report again, and it was down to 6 cases. So I just want to make a point that mask is very important. Mask is probably the best way to protect, to break the link in between, whether it's sprayed or not. So
Okay. Thank
that's all
you.
I make.
Thank you. Okay, we could probably,
Well,
any more comments?
the last comment I'd make is, though, whether these are my recommendations, which concession stand more so is than any, but please, board, at the end of this meeting, these have to be the things that you feel strongly about, because it'll come back to you. You know it's gonna come back to you, and not you have to worry about defending things, but I'm just saying, you do, I think, have to be an advocate and a strong proponent of what you decide, and it'll be good. So just know that I'll go with whatever recommendations you leave this meeting with. We'll do our best to enforce. A couple other things, can I?
Yep.
Okay, so, some of the other things we will work through that I want you to be aware of is pep band playing. We've talked a lot about that. And we've decided that if the pep band is in a place removed from the concession, from the spectators area, and possibly in a U area, a U shape, There's usually about 10 or 15 of those, and they're off by themselves, that safely they could do that. We'd like to find a way that they can participate along with our other participants, our other student athletes that are participating. So anyway, just be aware that we're working through some issues there, but that's another decision. There will be some concern. You know, we do know that the band from some of our classes being a higher risk situation, the band is one of those higher risk situations. So we've got to work through that. And I think they visited with you on that, Mr. Benj, as well. And
I think it was my staff.
your staff, okay. But that's our plan at this point, is to allow the pep band, but to make sure that they are removed. They're not just sitting in the normal place around people, that they would have a spot and that they would be social distanced. And their sound might not be quite as strong, but if it's safer at this time, that's going to be the priority right now. Now, again though, board, if you see that there's a problem with that or you'd like a different recommendation, please feel free to talk about that. Here's a little bigger one, and I want the board to again weigh in on this. You know, we ordered multiple gators, and it's built into our plans for every student and staff member in our district. Those are rolling in now as we speak. They look pretty good, obviously. They're school coordinated and they look great. If you've been following the media the last few days, there has been concern. There's been some research behind what's the most effective face covering, and you could look at, you know, to what degree the research is really quality. I can't speak to that, but it's made the press, and if it's made the press, we have stakeholders that have seen it. And gaiters are not coming out at the top of the list. They are being seen as less effective than a cotton mask similar to the one that I'm wearing now. So and I have received a couple of emails from stakeholders, so there's no doubt that there's some concern of you know, is the school still going to have this part of their plan? Is there any talks of not having that a part of our plan? I did visit with Mr. Benj today. You know, as we talked about it, as we talked, and jump in here if I'm not speaking correctly, he said, at this point I wouldn't be prepared to recommend you not use the gaiters, but I want to look deeper into the research and what's happening there. And so I want to kind of reserve the right to possibly come back to the district if there's more information that comes in, because this thing changes daily. We've moved daily in this. Social distancing is still really, face coverings are number 2 if you look at the priority of what will keep you safe. Social distancing is number 1. Face masks are a second layer, and shields and things like that can even be additional layers. But we are planning still to do our best with social distancing, but they are schools, and we will do our best to keep social distancing in place. So I throw that out. I think at this point, I'd love for the board to express any concerns or thoughts regarding the gaiters. They could be used for incentives at another time. I wouldn't say they would be purchased and not used in a quality way. And I will say, when we purchased the gaiters, we did reach out to a few sources, and we were told gaiters are better than nothing. At that time, there wasn't any type of research. And yes, anything that a child will wear, and gaiters may be more convenient to wear, are going to be helpful to having a second layer of protection. So that's what we were told in the beginning in ordering these. But anyway, so I don't know if there's anything you want to add at all to this dilemma that we might face of whether to continue with the gaiters in our plan or abandon them, or what?
No, you know, after we spoke, I did have a chance to look a little bit at the primary research that was done, and I think that the focus of that research was on the material. And so I think that what we should probably do is evaluate what material the gaiters you ordered are made of, and whether or not this research would negate that, or if they're made of a different material that might provide adequate or more adequate protection. So I think that's part of the piece there. And I will say that when we spoke months ago, before you even ordered those, about the plan, the thing that I liked most about the gaiters is I felt like utilization would be better if it wasn't something that was around the kid's ear. If it was something they could keep around their neck and
Sure.
pull up and down, and it wasn't pulling on ears, especially in our younger population, I felt like that was really a value. And I still think there's potentially value there. But the actual research that was published is pretty damning in the sense that not only did gaiters perform less well than other masks, they actually seemed to increase spread due to the nature of the cloth. It seemed to push particles out faster, and so there was actually more respiratory droplet produced in that study. It's a single study, and I would really like to see more studies, but I do think it's something we definitely have to consider, and especially the optics of it being widely publicized in the last week. We definitely have to consider, we don't want any parents to feel like we're not doing the best that we can do. So I think my suggestion would be probably that we at least set them aside temporarily while we evaluate the merits of the fabric that they're made out of, and see if there's additional research that comes out, and probably look toward more traditional masks, at least temporarily until we can learn them.
Yeah.
And I think hearing that it's one study, that we share that information. It was one study. Here's what common sense tells me, as you mentioned with the gaiters, they're already around their neck. I don't want to, nor do I want to see any kids, whether they're my grandkids or somebody else's kids, if they're this type that's hanging, it's gonna be on the floor. It's gonna be, kids walk in from outside where, the dogs have been out on the playground and they've been in the grass, and kids have come in and now they're stepping all over the floor, and that mask ends up on the floor. And we put it up and strap it to our face and breathe out of it. It makes zero sense to me in just common germs that something that is gonna come off and on the face and end up on the floor and on a germy desk and everywhere else, that then it's supposed to be strapped right back on your face so that you can put it as close to your mouth as possible. So I'd say we use the gaiters and we tell people that was one study until more studies confirm that they're not really effective.
Now be aware, be reminded that our plan did not say the gaiters were ever required. They said they would be issued
Available.
multiple gaiters would be issued each student, and there would be one choice that a student could wear. So we never made it that they would be required, just that they would be, the convenience of the gaiters would be provided.
Yeah, I don't think we should abandon them, and I do like something that's right here, it can go back up, and it's right here, and it's not gonna be on the floor where people are stepping after they've been out on the grass and another germy.
I'm pretty sure our gaiters are polyester, right? Yeah, we looked at that. So
I think the one that you showed me was polyester, and I believe that this study looked at a non-polyester gaiter. I would have to look
fleece,
it
are
up.
they the
I believe they were
same?
fleece gaiters,
yeah.
and I believe it was the fleece that was the primary problem, and so I think that we should, from my perspective, it would probably be good to come up with some messaging to make it clear how this study does pertain and how it differs from what we're doing, so that people understand this is, I don't think that this study is an apples to apples comparison to what what your plan was. There are some differences there that we probably need to emphasize if questions arise.
The other point that I think is important to just put on the table right now is, we do know that the neck gaiters do satisfy the governor's declaration about face covering, so that it is included there that a neck gaiter would. So we are in compliant with the expectation that he has in place.
Now, go ahead.
And they are selling filters, cotton filters now, to put inside your mask too.
So we will have, this is the thing, if I send my child to school not opting to use the gaiter, obviously these are available, so they have a choice.
Yep.
Okay.
And I know people who have purchased masks for their kids as part of their back to school wardrobe that kids
They're gonna
are
look good.
excited to wear. I also, some school districts have lanyards that will hold their mask so that it won't end up on the floor. I mean, that just really concerns me, just in germs generally. It's just a bad idea to be taking anything that's been on the
Yeah.
floor and sticking it up
Okay.
to your face.
What's our
Okay,
next
so-
one?
So, that's, you know, I don't know if lanyards to hold those would,
Just a couple other things, and I should have brought this up probably when we talked about the river region starting the year, the recommendation to be 100% virtual. I wanted to point out, so there was no surprises, and it was very clear what we're talking about. We have a large group of students, I think as many as 75, possibly to 100, that ride from the river region, that get on a bus and come to the mountain region and attend schools mostly at either Alvadar, Lyman, or San Juan High. Under this recommendation, those students would also be option 2. They would not, and again, I was able to talk directly with chapter house presidents, and I think I spoke with our board members as well, but that did it make sense to bring students out of that region to this region in person? And there are other things that played in as well, as far as like things like curfews, participation in activities that would possibly violate the curfews that are in place. But this recommendation would, in essence, say that those students are virtual as well, because they're in that region. So just be aware that this is not saying those buses are in any way not gonna continue long-term. They would continue, but right now, that we would work with those parents. Now, we are finding again that the vast majority, 90% probably plus, are selecting option 2, so that's making it a little helpful, but that busing issue sometimes becomes quite emotional, so, and we don't want it to ever be implied that we are discontinuing the bus long-term, because that's not even on the table. And then the last thing that I would like to be aware of is we do have an issue with our driver's ed situation in the river region. The list of students that need the driver's ed program is growing because we suspended that in fourth quarter. And it grows all through the summer, it just never ends, it's based on birthdays. And so we are really trying to decide how to handle that. Now, the state has issued some very stringent and very explicit guidelines that allows the driver ed car to continue. And you mentioned that you saw the car going down the road and you saw all the masks, because that is part of it. Everybody in a driver's ed car, there's cleaning etiquette that happens and all of that. We are concerned that we will have a hard time ever catching up with the length of the list. We don't have the resources. If we can hire a couple extra driver's ed teachers, we could probably catch it up pretty quickly, but they have to have an endorsement. You don't just find those overnight that are qualified to do that. So we are trying to solve that in the best way, but we are looking at the possibility, if we follow all the etiquette and a parent opts in, that driver's ed car might continue to provide that service for those parents that feel that following that etiquette will allow that. So that's kind of a little bit of another issue that's hanging there, but we're trying to deal the best we can with that one as well. So those are all the issues that are on the table and that we are trying to work through and had time to discuss with everyone, and so I deliver those to the board, and we'll take any recommendations or instructions you have for us.
So I have one clarification. Are you recommending a late start?
I am recommending that we find a
I missed that.
90-minute block. If you will look, now, so that's a good point, we didn't come back to this. There's an option, there's a schedule option of a late start, and there's a schedule option of an early release. I think what I would recommend, I think learning what I saw happen in registration and with our survey, I think we could have a survey ready to go out, a 1 or 2, 3, probably a 2-question survey to parents very quickly. And this would probably be more focused in, if we do agree that the river region is starting 100% virtual, this is not going to be on their radar right off the bat. They could transition back. So it is something that they still need to be aware of. But I would think the parents that their kids are starting in person immediately will have the most concern with what our bell schedule looks like. So I would probably recommend that we throw out a survey. We could throw it out district-wide, but that we get some parent feedback on whether they would prefer it to be a late start or whether they prefer for it to be an early release. And very possibly our staff as well. So we'd send it both places because our staff could weigh in as well on there. There's pros and cons both ways. it certainly feels more comfortable to be calling parents after school than at 7:45 in the morning, or even 8:15 in the morning, where they think they're rushing to get to work and get things put together. But that's just one variable. But there's lots of variables. Research says kids that get to school a little later do better. So there's a variable that plays out there. I see just, you could argue this and you could look at the variables one-sided. I think maybe we need voices to be heard from our stakeholders and our staff. And that's what I would recommend. And then if we see a majority in one place, that pretty much answers that where we'd like to go.
Any questions, Steve, or comments? Lucille? Mary? Okay, Nelson, do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
I would like to, Aaron, I may probably ask you to speak for David a little bit here, because he's been our survey builder, but he's been able to build those surveys pretty quick. This would be a very short one. Do you feel like I didn't speak out of turn there, that we might could turn that around pretty quickly?
Yeah, we could get that out real quick.
Okay, thank you.
I do have a question real quick for Julie or Christy. I have had some comments from teachers, and I don't know if this is varying from school to school, about the art, the library, and so I'm hearing in one school the kids can go into the library, they can have art, they can have computer. Another one, the library comes into them, they place an order. Now the concern with that is, I mean, I understand the concern with the close proximity and being in the same place, but the concern with that is if they come into the classroom, then does that teacher get to leave and actually have that prep time? Because that's the big concern, is I'm losing that prep time with them coming into my classroom versus those students going in for those things.
Yeah, and we really worked on those school by school, so they do look a little different depending on what's reasonable within the school. And for some schools, for fine arts to rotate, it was much easier. And obviously, we're trying to limit the movement of students, from place to place, and that was one of the biggest reasons that we even started having that discussion. But for some schools like Samar High, it's not reasonable because the students are moving around through classes, and so that's not reasonable. And so within that, we try to just follow the social distancing, wearing masks, all of those protocols, and still allow them to come into the library. Most of our secondary libraries are, there's not a whole class at a time. It's pretty limited number of students anyway, so it's mostly in our elementaries. And you're right, it does look a little bit different from school to school.
So how do we
But
accommodate
prep
that
time,
teacher?
Yeah. So for instance, for Marcel Elementary, it's not necessarily prep time for all of the teachers. For library, usually it is. For fine arts, that's tier 3. That's also been built into their school land trust plan to be optional for tier 3 support. So a teacher could still continue to prep. They're just not in charge of the class. The fine arts teacher or the librarian
So they
is
would
in
take
charge of their
control of
class,
that
which is a
class.
different mentality, and it's really tricky for teachers to step back away from their class. And I think that's really going to just have to be a mindset shift with the teachers. They're going to have to, and if they've got their laptops or whatever, and they want to go in an empty room or something, or to the library so that they can have a quiet space, that could totally be an option. But some may choose to just stay there, and that's really just going to be the choice of the teacher and working that out with their building principals.
Okay. So are all
By helping to
elementary
protect
schools
that
kind of
as
in
well.
that scenario, or just
What?
Monticello's? Is Monticello's in that scenario? Is Blanding Elementary? in that
Blanding is
scenario?
also, Blanding's is not built into their school land trust plan that way,
Mm.
but their philosophy is built into their RTI, which is their tier 2, their small group intervention time. And so yeah, we're gonna have to work to protect that and support the teachers in that.
Okay, thank you.
So, thanks for bringing that up.
Anything else? Board? Okay, thank you. All right, Kyle, let me see where we're at. Mr. Brewer and Kyle, River Region Internet.
This is just an opportunity for us to present some information to the board based on some recent feedback and interaction that we've had with different entities, both from the Navajo Nation as well as the state of Utah. So We'll give Mr. Brewer a little bit of time to give some historical knowledge and then some of the steps that we've implemented and that we've taken up to this point to provide this information to the board and get some direction moving forward as to whether this is something we want to pursue and how we want to go about that.
Okay.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk to the board today, and I just want to tell and relate that we have some great leadership in this district. Thanks to the board for their support and to Superintendent, to Julie and Christy. There's been a lot of difficulty with this whole situation, and there's three different kinds of projects that are happening right now in connection with internet, especially in the river region. The first and oldest project is the fiber project, and many of you, as you drove south, you would see the big rolls of orange conduit, which is for fiber, and there's a bunch at the Ivans' ranch. That's all planning on being put in the ground from Blanding to Montezuma Creek and over to Bluff is the first phase of the fiber project. The next would be then down to Mexican Hat and Halchita, and then extend that down to Monument Valley and around to Navajo Mountain. What the fiber project gives us is it gives us great connectivity at our schools. There are a few communities that will be able to benefit from residential hookups. Bluff is one of those communities, Mexican Hat is one of those communities, and Halchita is one of those communities. There's a Community Connect grant that Emory Telecom has applied for and gotten permission for, where they will be putting fiber into those homes. But that's in addition to each of our high schools in those areas, and then they'll be tied to our elementary schools. That gives us the ability to have greater bandwidth and greater speed back to Blanding and then out to the general world of internet. We can also loop around to get some redundancy. So the first piece of this is the fiber project, and that project is going forward. We've been working with UETN on that, and they are now to a point where they're trying to make sure they have all of the right-of-ways and permissions to go through White Mesa. Once they go through White Mesa, we'll have Bluff and Montezuma Creek online, which will be wonderful. Now, that is the first fiber project. The second one, or the second connectivity project, I guess I would say, would be our hotspots. So at the beginning of the pandemic last year, we ended up needing to find a way to get connectivity to our students. So this is, this point, the hotspot point, they're just basically little MiFi hotspot units that we put into a household. We can put one into a household and 8 kids can connect to it. That's a lot of kids on one hotspot. It's not enough bandwidth, but we can turn that up, or we can give another hotspot to them, depending on the connectivity. And that's been somewhat successful in getting kids that otherwise don't have any connectivity. The other piece of that we have in place is drive-by Wi-Fi's, which is what I call them, which is probably a terrible name, but it's basically that we beam from some of our towers or our high schools to a pole in a community, which then acts just like these access points and covers a certain area, so that if you don't have fiber, if you don't have connectivity via a hotspot, you are close enough to get to a drive-by Wi-Fi to be able to get onto a filtered and secure network, just like you would in a classroom. This is all part of that second piece. The other piece that we have some CARES funds that we worked with UEN through to turn up our access points to allow for connectivity in parking lots. So if we have or in parking lots or in traditionally non-instructional places, such as maybe a cafeteria or a gymnasium where you could put a lot more people in there. We would need a heavier access. So we're doing some of those things. The third piece is kind of the piece that I think is the big piece. So those two projects are ongoing. We have some more. We stood one up at Rutherford. We've got to get one out on Cajon Mesa. We want to jump down to the Marks Church at Hatch. We have one at Douglas Mesa. And we also want to put some of those, as I said, turn those up on our high schools so that kids have the ability to get to a place where they can download the lessons that Christy and Julie and their teachers have been putting together. This third option is an option that was put forth by a couple of people, Solitech and Bitstream. And what happened is Solitech approached us and said, hey, we have this idea on how we can get internet to all of our homes in San Juan County. And I said, have you been to San Juan County? Because that's always my first. There's a lot of sandstone you have to dig through in San Juan County. But they have, so we said, have you been to San Juan County? And can you put a proposal together for us so we know what this is? How much it's going to cost? We need to know, because we have some outside entities that are willing to put money into this project to get connectivity. Governor's Office of Economic Development has been reaching out to us, as well as there's some CARES funding housed in some different entities around. But we didn't feel comfortable saying, hey, just write us a blank check. We need something so we know how extensive this is. So what you have in front of you, as I said, Kyle very wisely helped me navigate this, just because it's a huge deal. But we put out an RFP to ask companies that were interested in helping us build this network. And basically what this network is it's a LAN network, so it's a local area network that is from the school. It is not just an open network like you would get, say, from Emory Telecom. This is from our school. It's filtered, and it would come back to our schools and then back out. Currently, our microwave system, when the fiber's done, out the fiber, which is very important and will help. The idea is that Montezuma Creek, Monument Valley, Navajo Mountain, White Mesa, and Bluff be hooked up with this program. And in your notes, you can see some of the phases that they've talked about that they would be able to start. I think this, leastwise, this company says they could start by the 17th. I spoke with a gentleman this morning from Interlink Solutions, and they would help us put it in. But more importantly, what they would do is help us maintain it, because the maintenance cost is going to be. I mean, it's great to be given a new car or a new John Deere tractor, but then you gotta change the oil and stuff, and so. So we've asked for that document, and I'm not sure if you have that in, but I'll get that to you. But that's
I think that's the second
no.
one.
This is the I contacted him. I said I have to have this for the board, because the board's going to say, how much is this going to cost us to maintain? What are we going to have to do to make sure once we get through this and there's no more CARES Acts or those things.
Right.
It's a quite expensive project, and as I said, the things that we're doing are we're getting some coverage with those things. With our drive-by Wi-Fi's, we're trying to do everything very economically. Chris and Wesley have been mostly engineering those for us, but this program would install a radio in the house, and that company would be responsible for that, and it would pick up a signal from either our towers or a tower that was built or the high school and transmit it into the house. There's a couple of things we have to think about when we do that. One is that the Community Connects grant, we want to keep our speed low enough so that if an ISP or a private company came in and said, hey, we want to provide internet service to Montezuma Creek, any survey of our network would not disqualify a community for that. So
For an FDA loan.
for an USDA loan, yeah, for an FDA loan.
Yeah, USDA.
So go back to the cost again?
Okay, so the cost, if the cost we got from Solitech is, I think, right at $4 million.
$3.95.
$3.95 million.
Is that the install or the maintenance?
That's the install. The maintenance, depending on what maintenance we would have, and we spoke with our network engineer. Our whole thing is a demarcation line. So where is it that it stops being our responsibility and it starts being either the company we've contracted with to provide service or the end users. So there's a couple of different options. There's a fully managed service, a hybrid service, or a break-fix service. The break-fix service would be on each call out, but if it was a fully managed service, they would take everything from the towers on down to the end users. That would be, the estimate was $345,000 a year. The hybrid, where we would, they would take tickets, we would maintain our towers and things, would be about $172,000 a year. And those are the two tiers that they had given us. Then, of course, a break fix if they have to go out and fix it. That is, that's a big thing. I just don't know. I don't know how effective we can be without at least reliable internet service, and so.
So the one thing that I want to pitch in and just take a couple seconds to cover with Aaron is when we were going through this RFP process, again, when we were preliminarily approached by Solitech, was wanting to make sure that we had a wide breadth to see that if there were any other companies that had the possibility of doing this, that we gave them a fair, equitable shot to participate. So again, having these two bids, the action steps, and again, this is not always an action item, but what we'd like to get the board's input on is if the board is in favor of pursuing or looking into the possibility, such as the one that's being proposed, that we would then, from now, work with the governor's office, we work with some of these other entities that have come to the table and said, we have money that can help you get this project put into place. Because between our CARES money and what our current ongoing budget is, San Luis School District has not allocated any funds to put towards this gigantic of an effort. And so what we would like to do, again, if this is an ideology or a process that we want to pursue, is we would like to reach out to some of these other interested parties and see what resources they have, so that we could then see what dollars could be put into place and see how far down the phase chain we can go. If we got someone that was willing to pitch in, $1.2 million, we'd be able to start with phase one, get some of that infrastructure, and be able to pursue those channels. Again, like Aaron said, we're not trying to become an IEP, we're not trying to provide internet, but again, creating that reliability and helping to establish that for our students. We hope that this doesn't last any longer than a year, but again, not knowing that and maybe looking to the next 3 to 5 years, this could be a resource and an avenue where we could get that internet put into those houses more quickly, but it would create an issue and a necessity of us to be able to find funds to be able to facilitate this project that are outside of district funds.
And it would be something that would be used on into the future with the instruction piece.
Correct.
Okay. Any comments? Or we want them just to kind of go forward?
Lori,
Yes, Nelson?
I just wanted to let Kyle know that Navajo Nation has $90 million of CARES Act money that they want to use for our students as far as getting internet services as well. So I just wanted to suggest that to Kyle that maybe he can, knock on their door and introduce this project to them too as well. Thank you.
Okay,
So in the initial contact, there was actually multiple representatives from the Navajo Nation, and they've been a big pusher on this to say, we have funds and resources, let's get something put together and see what the outline would look like. So I appreciate that, Nelson. We'll continue to, oh, I lost him. We'll continue to evaluate that avenue and see what's going on.
so yeah, you'll just go ahead and do that and then bring that back to us.
We've had some interest, this is really what it boils down to. We've had agencies, the Go-Ed Office of the Governor, the Navajo Nation, they've all said, we have some money that's a possible help to you in this aid. Then they say, well, but what do you think this is gonna cost you? And we haven't been able to give them a number. This is the first time we've actually had some type of a definite range of a number that we can give them. So we'll find out what did they mean by saying they were a possible help to us in this problem? We're gonna find that out now when we say, hey, we're looking for $4 million to get started on this.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Aaron.
I appreciate your effort. Okay, fall sports schedules for 2021.
Yes, just quickly here, again, this happens every year. Maybe the difference here is a couple of things to keep in mind with these schedules.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. If we do go forward with the recommendation that the river region start 100% in virtually for first quarter, that would pretty much cancel their fall season. So they do have a schedule on there, but it would be canceled in essence. There would be very little left after first quarter. So keep that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is the Utah High School Association has come out with some recommendations regarding how the protocols they'd like to see in place to be as safe as possible to conduct their activities. And we're trying to follow those protocols. One of those protocols that'll be a little bit of a challenge is they've asked that any large groups that travel long distances consider taking 2 buses. So be aware that that's out there, that the recommendation is out there, and so anyway, that whether we comply with that or not, or whether we look at that or not, but it is out there, and that would provide the ability to be more social distance on these long trips. But you can see what the length of trips we are looking at. When I first looked at this, I thought maybe this isn't the year for some of these long trips, but it's hard to change schedules. It really is to move things around.
Well, our trips are just long anyway.
And where we
We
live.
find long trips, so.
We have long trips, yep. I was a
Say,
coach, I rode many
find
hours
out
on the bus.
what kind of masks they're saying are effective, and tell the kids to keep on their masks and take one bus.
Well, this is my thing, if you're practicing as a team, you're together as a team, and then they wanna separate you on the bus, I know that's the recommendation, but we can kinda do what we want, correct?
Yeah, it's just a protocol.
Okay,
recommended protocol.
any comments on these, any concerns? Okay, all right, let's go to, if not, that will be an action item.
Yes, it is.
Okay,
And then,
locations.
number 6, again, could be, I don't know that, alls I wanted to make sure is that that wherever we hold our next few board meetings, we make sure we do it by our design. If there's any thought or intention of changing any locations due to the COVID situation, I think we ought to be talking about it now. I don't know that I'm advocating for it, but it's probably a discussion that we want to have. Our next one is scheduled. If you look down, you can see the list of the information items that are attached down there. So you can see that our next one is scheduled for, that's when it'll start, September 9th in Monument Valley. Now, I don't know how Monument Valley feels about us bringing a board meeting down either, so Nelson,
That's
you could weigh in on that. We've been pretty successful streaming them from here. That could be more difficult in a different location, but we've got it kind of figured out from here. So if there's any change of location, I think we ought to make a formal motion today and let the public know that, and if there's not, then we'll continue the schedule, but I just thought now's the time to make sure we're doing what we want to do.
Nelson, do you wanna weigh in on that?
Yeah, I would suggest to continue what we're doing from the district.
From the
Okay.
district office.
And you're okay with, doing how you're doing it?
Yeah, I'm good with it. If I can get phone calls and internet services here at my house where I'm at, so as far as J-Tail, but you get behind the base of it and you're not able to, but I'm good with holding the district office again if we would. Thank you.
Okay.
So, Nelson, if I understand correctly, and I'm say I agree with this, if this is what you're saying, is through the end of this year, hold all of the rest of the board meetings at the district office due to the whole COVID-19 thing?
Nelson, did you hear
So
that?
Yeah, I would say maybe we ought to go increments of 2 months and see how it goes throughout the year.
Okay. So for September, October is here anyway, so at our October meeting, we could reevaluate.
And we could,
Correct.
we could flip some possibly later so that we
Yeah.
get back down there if that works out.
Depending on the situation.
All right, so we comfortable with that at the end of October?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Kay, so we will go back to that in October and talk about it. We'll go district office until then. Well, I guess it's an action item. I shouldn't say we're done. Okay, let's go to the spend plans.
These are on here just for your information. We worked very diligently, hard, and I think we, for the most part, saw a lot of success with spend plans. We still will have a number of issues that will arise and we'll work through those. Now, in this case, we have some that were, I asked how did they get overlooked, and supposedly they somehow got lost a little bit, or somebody thought it was submitted. But these are some plans that were failed to be submitted in the normal process we went through last year, and these are for this year. If they're, again, if they're for fall, and we make our decision regarding the river region, because both of these are in the river region schools, then it may not apply as much, but they still ought to be approved, because that'll go on record and they'll be able to use that for next year's kind of as a starting point and be able to see where it went from there. But so you need to lay these on here. They have to be seen 3 times before they can even be approved. So this is not on here as an action item. You'll see them again next month, and then the following month they'll be on there as an action item if you want to approve them.
Any comments? Okay, I do, Monument Valley High School FFA, they do have $220 just for the clothing. Can we look into that? And Whitehorse High School, their DECA program, they do not have a sustainability cost associated with that. We just need to double check and make sure if there is one.
Which one was that?
Whitehorse High School DECA, DEC.
No sustainability. Yeah, we'll look and
There's
see.
no sustain, and all of them do like a 15 or 10, so we need to see if there is one before, if you will.
Awesome. Very good.
Okay, Kyle, the school fee payment.
Just as an update, that has been set up and established for every secondary school as well as out at our Lyman Middle School. And I have had several questions from the school level as well as the superintendent discussed with me the other day. Wanted to get some clarification, so this is on as an action item to get clarification from the board and have consensus on whether that card processing fee should be passed along to the parent, and whether that's something that San Juan School District will continue to understand is deducted from the fees that are collected from those online payments.
So I thought, Steve, last month you said we would absorb the cost. Was that your feeling on it?
I stated that opinion, yes.
Okay, so how do you feel? Yes? Okay, Nelson, you feel the same? We're gonna
But we're
absorb
not
that
voting
cost?
on it right now.
I mean, well, what is your opinion, Nelson?
That's.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what's your question again?
We're just getting a feel, what your feelings are on the school absorbing the credit card or online payment fee, or the transactions, if they use a credit card to pay fees. Okay.
If, you know, I think after the first year, we'd be able to bring a report of what exactly did that amount to.
Which would help.
Because we might be talking, you know,
Well-
looking at what we're talking about there.
Yeah, and also, Steve made several comments about, you know, even efficiency and handling checks and handling cash and those credit card payments. And if we can move to all credit card payments, for one, that saves some time with our employees, handling those things, going to the bank, and then just having cash as well. Plus, we have the payments. We've gathered that now. I mean, what kind of, Kyle, do you have the data that shows of fees that we didn't collect because it just was never collected in cash or a check bounced, those kinds of things? But if the efficiency of just getting it in a credit card may save us money in the long run, truly. And
We have record of unpaid balances, if that's what you mean, at the end of the year.
that's exactly, so
Now-
they don't participate unless it's on a card. And then if we do everything with a card, that creates a lot more efficiency and takes a load off of our employees to perform other
And
tasks.
there's an annual process of that, where if they have any unpaid fees, they can't check out for the school year until those are paid. So that does happen.
But we
every
still
year.
have a balance of unpaid.
No, the student cannot check out at the end of the year unless they paid those fees in full.
Right, so every student checks out and we've never had any unpaid fees?
No, I wouldn't say that. I'd say that there possibly has been some fees that
That's
they
what I'm
pay
saying,
their
so
parents haven't paid.
if it's, we collect a credit card or a debit card, and, I mean, there's lots of reasons why it's, anyway, a good idea just to collect it. We've got the money.
Okay, so we'd like, well, it's an action item, but we would like a
Thank you for that
a
clarification.
report next year.
Yep.
At the beginning of the year, it'd be nice to see how much those fees did cost.
Okay.
Okay, rental home, demolition.
Yeah, this is just a quick item, just update the board. Mr. Sondreger was able to get on that project quickly, and that home has been demolished. He has finished leaving just some of the final touches on that property, make sure it's level and that it'll be easy for our maintenance guys to continue to maintain it.
Okay. Anything? All right. And then, Mary,
Okay.
this is a USBA.
So I've been
session.
asked by the USBA committee that is doing the evaluation, you know, redoing or fine tuning the evaluation tools that the USBA uses and offers to all school districts, and of course we've used those. So they have 6 questions they want our board to answer. So does evaluation evoke a positive or a negative response? Do we change the name? Is that something that we want to recommend to the committee to change the name because evaluation sounds negative, or is it fine?
Sounds good.
I didn't think anything of it.
Okay, so number 1, it's, okay, it's good. All right. Would an incentive encourage you, as in us as a board, to complete the superintendent BA board individual evaluations? If USBA said, we're going to, you know, give all the districts a prize, I don't know, would some kind of incentive encourage us to use those evaluations more regularly? Something, they just said an incentive, some type of incentive, you know, they give us a prize at the state convention, I don't know, my answer is no.
I would say, but the thing
My answer is
is,
no.
sometimes those evaluations, in all honesty, are a little bit they're so detailed or
There's-
so broad that they either need to dial down and have 10 to 15 questions.
Okay.
They're too cumbersome, in my opinion.
Okay,
That, I think that's why.
that
if
wasn't
you
one
gave
of the
me-
questions, no,
Well,
I'm just kidding.
If you gave me an incentive,
Okay.
I still wouldn't do it, because it's
The
too
incentive would be
cumbersome.
less questions,
It's too
So-
cumbersome.
incentive, less questions,
It-
okay.
Incentive to the board, incentive to the individuals filling it out, incentive.
Yeah.
To the school district, the board, I mean, the board is what they're asking. The answer is no, is that what I'm getting?
Yeah.
I'm saying, but we're
I'm
gonna
having
see,
a
the
hard time
incentive would be
thinking that.
less questions, and,
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
if it's revised, we might be more apt to using it, let's put it that way.
okay. All right, number 3,
Yes, we have.
do you use those? Yes, we use those, I don't even need to ask it, it doesn't ask how much. If you use your own evaluations, can we share those? We have had our own evaluation, and
Yes, Matt makes
So-
a great one. In fact, he's the incentive.
Can we share that?
create more.
Okay, we'll put, and do we use them on alternating years? I would say generally yes. Okay, and you know when you're, yes, we do, so, okay, I'm done. So I do that in less time than what it's given?
All right, yep, good job, you. Thanks.
Okay.
All
thank
right,
you,
we're
everyone.
just going to drop down and do the information items before we break.
Okay, so August 17th, teachers report back. August 20th is the first day of school, day for students unless we make a change tonight, and we'll discuss that at the action items a little more, see where that goes. September 7th, Labor Day, no school. September 9th is our next board meeting, and I've got a question mark, but now we can say that is here at the district office. Ken Garf truck use agreement, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah,
Doug?
just to give a brief update to the board, Mr. Olson was able to find out about a vehicle loan opportunity that Ken Garf is offering, and so if you see 2 trucks that have Ken Garf stickers or have publications on the side of them, those are actually on loan to the school district right now at no cost to the school district, and are being loaned to us for the use of transfer of material supplies or other needs that may be requisite or concerning COVID-19. So you may see those around town or see them throughout the community. Just want to let the board know what those are.
And then USBA pre-delegate assembly, August 21st and 22nd. They would like us to select somebody. Do we want to?
Mary's gonna talk to that.
Well, I will, I mean,
Just
I have,
explain
I've, so each district in the state of Utah gets to send one board member to be a voting member of the delegate assembly. And then at our convention in January, as a region, as 7 school districts that is on our region, we elected 2 people to be at-large delegates to represent our region, and then the alternates that were also elected. Lori's an alternate if one of the 2 at-large, and they're both from Harbin School District that we elected that day. You remember that. So I've attended that in the past and been our voting. I don't have to do that if somebody else is interested in doing that. If this board wants me to do that this year again, I'm willing and happy to do that, so.
Good job, you. Thanks.
Well, good,
Very
that's
well.
simple.
Okay, we're done.
Okay, I will do that.
Okay, and last thing is just your board meeting dates that are on there for the year, for your information always.
Okay. All right, we're adjourned till 6.
Great.
Thank you.
Lori?
I'm sorry, what?
Hey,
Yes.
Nelson,
Freaking dog.
I just wanted to run this by you and others. I wanted to suggest maybe if we could inform parents to do their census count while they're enrolling, registering their kids. Just encourage them to fill out their census, because I think it's very important that we do that, because we do get, funding through on basis of the census count as well. So I'm hearing that we're not doing very well on the river region on the census count reporting. So I just wanted to mention that if that's something that we can do.
Nelson, superintendent and I actually visited about that yesterday. We're working on putting together an email that we can send out to all the parents to remind them to do their census. We have had representatives reach out and ask for permission to go to both the Wyoming Valley and Montezuma Creek housing areas, and have set that up with local principals. So I know that at least our housing constituents have been contacted, but we are working on putting together a message that we can send out as a reminder to all parents to please fill that out, because it is beneficial for the school district in regards to federal funding.
Okay, good, appreciate it, thank you.
Yep.
Board, would you like to go into close to discuss real property? And then we'll have the rest and then go back, okay?
I move that we go into closed session to discuss sale or purchase of real property.
We're making a motion.
Yeah, I followed followed up with her yesterday, earlier today, and told her yes. Yeah, no, she emailed this afternoon, I told her you guys should be good to go. Actually, when I get the walk with Joe, he said they could probably get in this afternoon. I'm like,
That's
I'm
all right,
gonna change
I've
that
already
one time.
set it
We'll talk about tomorrow. We're gonna go tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So Steve made the motion to go to close to discuss real
Purchase or sale of real property.
purchase or sale of real property. And I need a second. Lucille made a second. Roll call.
Based on that, before we go into closed session, I am going to recuse myself, not because I do have a conflict of interest, but there's a perception that I maybe have a conflict of interest because we may or may not be, have people interested in property that share the same last name that I have. And so to avoid any accusations to the district, I'm going to not only recuse myself from the discussion, from voting on that when the time comes, I'm gonna recuse myself from any discussion, I'm gonna remove myself from the room. And I'm choosing not to have any part of that so that there's no confusion on any public, on anybody's part that I may have that. I can still vote to go in and then I'll leave. I'm just
So
stating
let's-
that because we have a second and now it's opportunity for a discussion.
So roll call.
Steve Black, yes.
Lucille Cody, yes.
Mary Shumway, yes?
Lori Mon, yes.
Nelson Yeoman, yes.
Okay.
And I will be leaving the room now and you can discuss all this without